He was the one person I thought I could trust with anything. But trust is a dangerous thing, and once you give it away, you can't control what it becomes. I trusted him like a brother. That is the part that still sticks in my throat. Not the betrayal, not even the secret getting out, but the memory of how close we used to be. How real it felt. Like I had finally found someone who actually saw me, not the mask I wore for the world. His name was Tyler. We met in the worst way possible, both of us sitting outside a grief support group neither of us had the guts to walk into. I was chain-smoking, trying to build up the courage. He just leaned back against the brick wall and said, "Looks like we are both too screwed up to go in." That broke the tension. We never did walk in that day. Instead, we ended up at some 24-hour diner, swapping horror stories over cheap coffee and greasy fries. It was not immediate, but something clicked that night. I had never really had a close friend before. Not the kind who asks how you are doing and genuinely wants the real answer. Tyler did. He asked about my sister, about the car crash that gutted my family. I asked about his mom, the one who died before he could say goodbye. There was no small talk between us, just silence and truth. We started meeting up every weekend, and sometimes during the week if things got really bad. We talked about everything. The nights we wanted to vanish. The stuff that scared us more than death. He never flinched when I opened up. He actually listened. I told him once that I hated how easy it was to pretend everything was fine around other people, and he just nodded and said, "Yeah, but pretending gets heavy." Those were some of the best nights of my life. Just sitting on the hood of my car, parked on the edge of town, trading stories like secrets we never wanted to carry alone. We laughed more than you would think, considering the stuff we talked about. Pain makes you funny, I guess, or at least weird enough to keep going. One night, he brought a bottle of something strong, and we passed it back and forth, legs swinging off the edge of the old train bridge. I remember the wind cutting through our jackets, the sound of distant freight cars rumbling, the stars blurred from just a little too much alcohol. That night, I told him everything. The thing I had never told another living soul. It came out slow at first, like pulling teeth, and I thought he might interrupt, or look away, or worse, laugh. But he just listened. Dead quiet. I looked over when I finished, and he said something I will never forget. "You can trust me." And right then, I believed him. I wish I had known that trust has an expiration date. But back then, it felt like healing. Like maybe telling someone was the first step toward feeling whole again. That night changed everything. And I had no idea it would be the beginning of the end. I am not going to spell out the secret just yet. Not here. Not now. But just know this, it was not something small. It was not some embarrassing story from high school or a stupid thing I said during a bad breakup. It was the kind of truth that shifts how people look at you. The kind that, once it is out there, you cannot pull it back. It started when I was 15. That is all I will say for now. Carrying it around for so long had twisted something in me. I got good at hiding it, at wearing this version of myself that looked normal, even friendly. I smiled a lot. I cracked jokes when I had to. No one ever saw past that. Except Tyler. That night on the train bridge, when I told him, it felt like a weight dropped off my chest and landed in his lap. And for once, someone else was holding it with me. He never asked for details. Not right away. Just said, "Man, I am sorry. That should have never happened." And then he did something that caught me off guard. He leaned over and bumped his shoulder against mine, like we were just two kids sitting on a bench waiting for a bus. Like it did not change anything. And that made me trust him even more. After that night, we got closer. Texts turned into calls. Calls turned into those weird late-night drives where we would go hours without saying a word, just letting the music speak for us. We became the kind of friends other people envied. There was no competition, no fake stuff. Just real, raw friendship. I remember thinking, this is what a brother feels like. He started opening up more too, about his past, his temper, the way he sometimes hurt people just to feel in control. I never judged him. How could I? We were both carrying different brands of broken. There was one time we ended up at this party out in the woods. Some mutual friend invited us, and we went just to shut people up. But halfway through, some drunk guy made a joke that hit too close to home. Tyler saw my reaction, and without hesitating, he got in the guy's face and told him to back off. No hesitation, no fear. Just fire. That was the kind of loyalty he had, for a while. I would have done anything for him. I thought he felt the same. And maybe, in the beginning, he did. But things started to shift. Small at first. A weird pause before he replied to my texts. A couple of hangouts canceled at the last minute with vague excuses. I brushed it off. Life gets busy, right? But the cracks were forming, and I kept ignoring them. Until one day, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Someone else knew, and it was not because I told them. It started small, so small I almost convinced myself it was coincidence. I was at this little bar we used to hit after work, one of those dim places where the jukebox always plays something from the 90s, and you can still smell the fryer oil from 20 feet away. Tyler and I had not talked in over a week, but I figured he just needed space. That night, a friend of his, someone I barely knew, walked past me, grinning in this strange, knowing way. He said, "Hey, man, heard something wild about you," and then laughed before I could even respond. I laughed too, the way you do when you have no clue what is going on, but you do not want to look paranoid. But something in his tone hit me wrong. There was that edge people get when they think they know your story. On the drive home, I could not stop replaying it. My first thought was denial. Maybe Tyler had said something harmless, something out of context. Maybe I was being dramatic. He would never tell anyone, not about that. He promised. He said, "You can trust me." I had heard those words in his voice so many times that they almost echoed. Still, my gut would not quiet down. The next day, I texted him. Just a simple "you good?" It sat there on read for hours. Then he finally replied, "Yeah, busy lately. We'll catch up soon." Something about the message felt colder than usual. Shorter, cleaner, like he had rewritten it a few times before hitting send. Over the next few weeks, more little things piled up. People who used to barely acknowledge me were suddenly making awkward small talk. A coworker looked me in the eye one morning and said, "Hey, just so you know, I do not judge anyone for what they've been through." My heart dropped into my stomach. That was not a random comment. That was pity disguised as kindness. I walked out of the office early that day, drove until the sun went down, and parked by the river, the same spot Tyler and I used to sit at when we needed to clear our heads. I kept staring at my phone, half hoping he would call, half dreading that he might. Finally, I called him myself. It rang twice before he picked up. His voice sounded normal. Too normal. He asked what was up, told me everything was fine, acted like nothing had changed. But the moment I mentioned that people had been saying weird things, the air went dead. He said, "Man, you're overthinking. Nobody knows anything." But there was a pause after it. A small, sharp silence that said more than words ever could. That was the first time I felt it, the gut-deep certainty that something was wrong. I hung up, but my hands kept shaking. Because deep down, I already knew the truth. Somewhere, somehow, Tyler had started talking. And whatever he had said, it was only the beginning. It happened 3 days later. I was walking into the break room at work when I caught the end of a conversation I was never meant to hear. Two coworkers, Jen and Chris, were huddled near the vending machine, talking low, but not low enough. She told me Tyler heard it straight from him. Jen whispered. Chris leaned in. Wait, he actually said it out loud? I froze in the doorway. That name, Tyler. It hit me like a punch to the ribs. Jen nodded, eyes wide. Yeah, swore it was true. Said it happened years ago. But still, that explains so much, right? They both fell quiet when they saw me. Jen gave me this nervous smile and quickly grabbed her coffee, walking out like nothing had happened. Chris followed, avoiding eye contact. I just stood there, staring at the floor tiles, heart pounding so hard I thought it would break my ribs from the inside. I wanted to scream, or throw something, or rewind time 10 seconds. But I did none of that. I just walked out, got in my car, and sat there with my head against the steering wheel, trying not to spiral. That was it. That was the moment I knew, without question, that Tyler had told someone. He had told multiple people, and not just random strangers. People who knew me, people who now saw me differently. I did not go back into work that day. I drove aimlessly for hours, circling the outskirts of town like maybe I could outrun the shame. That secret, my secret, was out now, and I had no idea how far it had spread. By the time I got home, my phone had lit up with 3 texts and a missed call from my cousin. We had not talked in years. Her message was short. Hey, I heard something. I just want to say I'm here if you need anything. I stared at those words like they were written in another language. She heard something, which meant someone told her, and that someone had to trace back to Tyler. There was no one else who knew. Not a single soul. I texted him that night. I tried to keep it calm, but I was boiling inside. Did you say something to someone? Because this feels like it's coming from you. He did not answer right away. A couple hours later, I got a one-liner back. I only told one person. I thought I could trust her. I'm sorry. That was it. That was the message. No explanation. No ownership. Just a weak excuse wrapped in guilt. He told one person. And now the most private thing I had ever shared was a wildfire. I wanted to believe it was an accident. I wanted to believe it was some moment of weakness, some slip of the tongue he regretted. But the truth is, once a secret leaves your mouth, it stops being yours. And now, mine was everywhere. There is something cruel about whispers. They do not shout. They do not fight you directly. They just hang in the air, floating room to room, face to face, until they are part of the oxygen. That week felt like living in a fog made of side eyes and unfinished sentences. At work, no one said anything outright, but I felt it. People hesitated before speaking to me. Conversations shifted when I walked into the room. Even the usual office banter I had always relied on. The dumb jokes about coffee being too weak or the printer jamming again. It all dried up. And no one was brave enough to say why. Outside work, it was even worse. A couple of friends stopped returning texts. One unfriended me online without warning. And then came the worst part, the messages from strangers. I got a DM from some guy I barely remembered from high school. It started off casual, like he was just checking in. But halfway through, he slipped in a line that turned my blood cold. Tyler said you opened up to him about what happened that summer. That took guts, man. That summer. Only Tyler knew about that. The timeline was matching up. Every awkward stare, every quiet pause, every friend growing distant. They all traced back to Tyler opening his mouth. One person. That is all it took. I sent him another message. I had to. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. You said you told one person. Why are people I barely know quoting my life back to me? No response. A full day passed. Then another. Nothing. Then finally, around midnight on a Thursday, I got a reply. One sentence. One final blow. I didn't think it would matter. It's not like you did anything wrong, right? I stared at that message so long my screen dimmed. Not like I did anything wrong. As if that was the point. As if shame only belongs to guilt and not to pain. As if having your deepest trauma turned into casual gossip was no big deal, as long as you were innocent. It made me sick. I wanted to see him, face to face. I wanted to look him in the eye and ask how he could take something so sacred, so private, and hand it out like it was part of a story he owned. I almost drove to his place that night, but I stopped myself, because I knew if I saw him right then, I might say something I could not take back. Instead, I sat in the dark, fists clenched, heart pounding, thinking over and over, he betrayed me. And I had not even seen the worst of it yet. Because the secret had not just spread, it was being twisted. When someone tells your story without asking, they never get it quite right. And when they tell it again and again, it mutates. What started as a secret shared between friends had turned into a half-true horror show I barely recognized. The first time I heard the distorted version, it came from someone I used to trust. Her name was Rachel. We had known each other since college. She reached out over voice chat, said we needed to talk. Her tone was all wrong, like I had been caught doing something I didn't even know I was accused of. She asked me if it was true, if I had been involved in something back then. That was her phrase, been involved. Not hurt, not survived. Just this vague, cloudy implication like maybe I had done something, or maybe I had let something happen. It was slippery, like oil on water. My stomach dropped. I asked her what exactly she had heard. She hesitated, then said Tyler told someone I had confessed to being part of something bad, that I carried guilt about it for years. I could barely breathe. I never said that. I never used those words. I told Tyler what happened to me, what someone else did. And now, it was being retold like I had been the one with something to hide. I asked Rachel who told her. She got quiet, said it came through someone else, some girl who dated Tyler for a few months. A girl I had never even met. Somehow, she had turned my pain into a party rumor. The pieces were falling into place. Tyler had told this girl, maybe late at night, maybe while trying to sound deep, maybe to impress her with his sensitive side. And she had told someone else. And now the story had been passed along enough times that I was no longer the victim in it. I was the mystery, the guy with a dark past, the guy who confessed something. I hung up on Rachel, not out of anger, out of grief. Because I finally understood, the damage was done. It was not just about trust anymore. It was about identity. People were starting to see me through a cracked lens, And no matter how loud I screamed the truth, the lie was louder. Easier. More fun to pass around. And Tyler? He had gone silent again. Completely vanished from group chats. Not responding to messages. As if I was the one who had crossed a line. That week, I lost another friend. Then another. No explanation, just the slow, sinking pull of isolation. I was radioactive now. No one wanted to be close enough to ask real questions. They just drifted away. And just when I thought it could not get worse, I saw a screenshot. One I was never meant to see. It showed up in my inbox without warning. No message. No context. Just a forwarded image from an old friend of mine, Drew. A guy who never got into drama, but always had my back. The subject line just said, "Thought you should see this." I opened it. It was a screenshot of a group chat. A private one. For names at the top, including Tyler's. The conversation had happened days earlier. My name was all over it. Tyler was mid-rant. I read the words in his voice. Casual, arrogant, like he was just venting. Look, I kept his secret for years, okay? But the dude's been acting like a victim forever. Maybe it's time people saw the full picture. Someone replied with a laughing emoji. Another person said, "Yeah, he always seemed sketchy to me anyway." But then came the line, the one that sent ice through my chest. Besides, it wasn't even that bad. He said he let it happen. That's not the same as being innocent. He said I let it happen. Those words kept echoing. Like I had chosen it. Like I had been a willing part of something I had barely survived. As if trauma had terms and conditions, and I had violated them. That was the moment it all crystallized. Tyler had not just slipped up. He had rewritten my story, twisted it into something dark and vague and disgusting, so that he would not have to carry the weight of what I gave him. He needed to make himself look less like the guy who broke trust, and more like the guy who shared too much. I could not move for a long time after reading it. Just sat there in my kitchen, phone glowing in my hand, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The betrayal cut deeper than any lie I had ever been told. Because this was not just a rumor. This was strategy. Tyler had turned my most vulnerable moment into ammo. He used it to entertain people, to gain favor, to feel important. And then he rewrote the truth to make it all seem justified. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call him, to ask why, to demand some kind of explanation that would make any of this make sense. But I did not. Because what would that fix? He had already shown me who he really was. And deep down, I think he had been that person all along. The silence I thought was friendship, it was just a waiting game. And now, everything was scorched. The last piece of trust gone. But what came next? That surprised even me. I had spent my whole life guarding that secret like it was a living thing. Feeding it with silence. Locking it away where no one could twist it. But now that it was already out there, poisoned and warped and passed around like a campfire story, I figured maybe it was time I told it my way. No shame. No filters. Just the truth. I started small. I reached out to Drew, the same guy who sent me the screenshot. We met up at this rundown diner off Route 30, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a waitress who always smells like menthols. We sat in the back, away from the regulars, and I told him everything. Not the rumor, not the recycled version, but the real thing. I told him what happened that summer when I was 15. The person who hurt me. The way I froze instead of fighting back. The way I blamed myself for years. The nightmares. The guilt that was never mine to carry. I told him about the night on the bridge with Tyler. How I had finally spoken it out loud. How for one brief moment, it felt like maybe I had handed it to someone who would protect it. And then I told him how Tyler shattered that trust. Drew just listened. When I finished, he did not say much. Just nodded slowly and said, "That's heavy, man. But that's yours. No one else gets to own it." Something in me cracked open after that. Not in a bad way. In a way that felt like healing. So I kept going. I started having quiet conversations with the people who mattered, one by one. The people who had heard things secondhand. The ones who had believed half-truths because they did not know better. I told them the truth. My truth. No drama. No tears. Just honesty. And slowly, the fog started to lift. Not everyone came back. Some had already made up their minds. Some preferred the version with more suspense, more scandal. But a few stuck around. The real ones. And that was enough. I did not do it for revenge. I did it because the worst part of betrayal is not losing the other person. It is losing yourself in their version of your story. And I was done letting Tyler hold the pen. But just when I thought it was all behind me, when I started feeling like maybe I could breathe again, I got a message. From him. Tyler. The message came on a Tuesday morning, right as I was heading out the door for work. No warning. No subject line. Just his name sitting there on my screen like a bruise that never fully faded. Tyler, hey. I know I messed up. Can we talk? For a long time, I just stared at it. Part of me wanted to delete it on sight. Another part wanted to reply with something cruel, something that might make him feel a fraction of what I felt when my world cracked open because of him. But I didn't do either. Instead, I let the message sit. A full day, then another. I did not respond until Thursday night, after a long shift, when the apartment was quiet and I had nothing but time. All I wrote was, sure. One conversation. Your place. Tomorrow night. When I pulled into his driveway, everything felt familiar and wrong at the same time. His car was in the usual spot. Porch light still flickered. Same doormat with the stupid "come back with tacos" joke. He opened the door like nothing had changed. Like we were still friends. I did not smile. I stepped past him into the living room and waited for him to start. And he did. He talked fast, like if he could say enough words, he could outrun the truth. He said he never meant for it to spread. Said he trusted the person he told. Said he was in a bad place. Said he thought maybe talking about it would help him process. Said he thought I had moved on. That last part lit something in me. Moved on. From what exactly? From the trauma? Or from him? I interrupted. Calm, quiet. You told someone else's story. That's what you did. You took my pain and turned it into gossip because you didn't know how to carry it. And instead of owning that, you made me the villain to protect yourself. He looked stunned for a second, like no one had ever spelled it out for him like that. But I kept going. You said you thought it wouldn't matter, that I didn't do anything wrong. But it wasn't about right or wrong. It was about trust. You didn't just break it. You sold it. Tyler sank into the chair like the weight finally hit him. He started to say something else, but I stopped him. I'm not here for an apology. I'm not here to make peace. I just needed to look you in the eye and say this one thing. You do not get to own any part of my story ever again. And then I left. No yelling. No door slamming. Just me, walking out the same way I walked in. But lighter. Because now, for the first time in a long time, the silence was mine again. After that night, I never heard from Tyler again. No follow-up text. No late-night apology. No desperate attempt to smooth things over. Just silence. And honestly, that silence felt like peace. The world did not magically fix itself. People still whispered. Some relationships never recovered. A few folks still looked at me like I was a puzzle with a missing piece. That used to bother me. Used to keep me up, replaying conversations and trying to fix what I never broke. But something changed. Because for the first time in my life, I stopped hiding. I started speaking openly about what happened. I did not shout it from rooftops or blast it on social media, but when people asked, I told the truth. On my terms. With my voice. And it stopped being a secret. The power it had over me, gone. I met new people too. Friends who never knew the old version of me. People who judged me by who I was, not by what they heard. I stopped bending myself into someone more comfortable for others to accept. I stopped apologizing for surviving. I also learned something strange about pain. It grows quieter when you stop feeding it shame. One afternoon, I found myself back at that train bridge. The same spot where Tyler and I used to sit. It was colder now. The sky had that washed-out gray look, and the wind cut a little sharper. I stood there alone, staring down at the tracks, hands in my pockets. I thought about the night I told him. I thought about the silence that followed. And I thought about the man I was now. Not a secret. Not a victim. Not someone broken beyond repair. Just a man who survived, rebuilt, and walked through fire without letting it make him bitter. If you were wondering what the secret was, I will tell you this much. Something happened to me when I was a kid. Something I buried for years because I thought it was my fault. Something I finally spoke out loud because I thought I could trust someone. And when that trust broke, I thought I would break with it. But I didn't. Because now I know, the truth hurts. But silence rots. And healing? Healing begins when you take back your story. One piece at a time.